very sorry if you lost the time cost, right? But we thought that you guys were meant to get up and say the government shouldn't intervene. We thought we were meant to get up and say they should. We think nationalisation is basically a bailout in many of these circumstances. These kind of tactics, right? Let's see, what are the differences? In our model, the government goes in, buys up the shares, influences policy. In your model of nationalisation, which is apparently wholly different, the government goes in, buys shares, influences policy. Furthermore, the government is in tension with two of their other points. One, all the analysis about the free market and why innovation and not having a safety net is inherently good. Because presumably if you're just going to be nationalised, all the same principles apply and all the same harms that Team Canada identified apply. Secondly, it's in tension with all this stuff about the taxpayers, because they don't think the taxpayers should ever be responsible for CEO's failure. Well, why should they be responsible when a business is nationalised? We think that your proposal is essentially our proposal, and unless you come clean, we're going to continue debating and continue debating on the assumption that going in and controlling a company in some circumstances is exactly what we're proposing and what we're meant to be proposing. No, thank you. So let me now look at this idea about businesses that provide a critical social function. Because we recognise that there are businesses that produce benefits to consumers, to customers, to whole societies. Benefits that aren't, no thank you, that aren't always taken into account by the economic output and the economic value of that company. We look, for example, at postal services in many of the countries in Western Europe. We think that you have big companies, right, switching over to email. You have customers switching over to internet banking. But you still see literally millions of people around the world who rely on these services. You see small businesses who can't afford the immediate switch over to email. You see individuals who might be poor, they might be elderly, they might live in remote areas and therefore might need that postal access. You deny them that. Tell us how you don't.
You told us you didn't want to restructure companies insofar as you want to lay them off. So how are companies going to make a profit?
We didn't tell you we didn't want to restructure companies. We tell you that when you have people from the government on the boards of these companies, controlling them and telling them what to do, in such circumstances as restructuring is better for that company, it's better to save jobs save jobs, we think that's the kind of thing we do. If we think restructuring is just about laying people off, that's not what we do. And for all the reasons we've given about the kind of communities that suffer in the kind of ways we've outlined and still haven't been responded to. We think we think that the social utility of the people in these kind of circumstances, for example, being able to send a letter, right, being able to get their pension check, being able to keep in touch with their friends and family, is something that can never be accounted for by the amount that they are willing and able to pay to send a letter. Never be accounted for by the amount someone's willing to spend to send them a letter. We think because of the social good involved, no thank you, we think these positive benefits are something that the government needs to encourage, just in the same way that they encourage things with welfare generally. And we think we're going to give you 3 further examples of this wider principle, ladies and gentlemen. The first example we'd like to give you is national security. The reason the US government bailed out Lockheed in 1971 is that it wasn't an economic project, right? It was an interest that it said, it is in our interest strategically to have our own arms manufacturing industry. That's something we want to promote. And that's a company, by the way, that is still in operation after only a temporary bailout, and by the way, now making profit, Team Canada. We'd like you to answer to that. We don't think it's true to make this blanket assertion that all governments that are given temporary bailouts therefore run themselves into the ground over and over again. Go.
Yes, because we let them lay off.
Yes, because we let them lay off workers.
So we didn't allow them to lay off as many workers as they would have done otherwise. We don't defend every single bailout that's ever taken place. But what we said is that this bailout, saving many of the jobs, was better than saving none of the jobs, which is what you'd advocate. The second kind of thing we think fits this general principle is energy security. We think that many countries realise that they have a need for their own independent sources of energy. We think if you cut it off, they can't necessarily function. We think that's, for example, the reason why Ireland is still funding and still bailing out campers, because it realises that it has a strategic interest in having its own indigenous ability to produce oil. That's something tremendously important. And the third thing is regional transport. It's crucial to have regional transport for regional development, for economic linkages, ladies and gentlemen. That's why the Japanese government bails out JAL, the Japanese airline industry, to run inter-island flights. It recognises that there is a social good to equalising the economic development in that region. It's the same reason why the Penn Central Railroad was bailed out, because the US government realised that there was a need to have the northeastern part of the US in contact with one another. The world of Team Canada is a world where the elderly cannot receive their pension checks, where people in remote areas cannot always connect with the rest of the world, and where whole countries are allowed to let strategic industries like national security and like energy security to fail. That's not something we're willing to accept on Team England.
Continue for the proposition team, the third speaker, Venu Goswami.
Team England today doesn't know what a bailout is. A bailout, ladies and gentlemen, is when you preserve the private structure of a company and give it a chance to rebuild. Nationalizing a company is when you take the service that company provides, get rid of the company,